one-star reviews do happen. And in this episode, I'm going to show you what you can do about it. Not only to bounce back from the emotional blow that getting a one-star review can leave you with, but also the counterintuitive strategies using psychology that you can use to bring your podcast ratings back up wherever you want them to be. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. So, spoiler alert, if you have anything less than a 5-star rating on your podcast right now, you can get it back up to 5 stars ethically and honestly. So keep listening because I'm going to show you how. But first, I got to tell you the story about what prompted this episode. You know, I test things on the podcast behind the scenes all the time. I always tell our clients, my podcast is your guinea pig. I'm going to test it first so that you don't have to go through the heartache or, the frustration or any of the things that comes along with that testing process. And so that I can actually just pass along to you the things that work that you can implement and save yourself the hassle, the headache, the trial and error, and all those things. What happened though was we ran a test where we did a huge push of cold traffic to the podcast. And when we did that, a couple of 1-star ratings came in. I suspect from people who didn't actually take the time to listen to the podcast, because I think it's great. But nonetheless, those 1-star ratings came in. And I was annoyed because we have maintained an impeccable 5-star rating for over 5 years now of podcasting from over 150 ratings. And it brought us down to a 4.9. And the perfectionist in me was dying a slow death. But I wasn't going to let it stop me because I have a friend, Hal Elrod, who has also been a guest on the podcast, who has this 5-minute theory that whenever something happens that is outside of our control, you can vent, you can moan, you can cry about it, but only for 5 minutes. And then after those 5 minutes, you're going to make a decision and you're going to decide to do something proactive. Either you say, well, I can't change it, and you move forward in your life, or if there is something that you can do, you take action to do that. So I was mad. I allowed myself to be mad for 5 minutes. I might have rage typed, can you remove a 1-star rating from a podcast into Google? Let's just be honest here. But then I took a breath, I made a plan, and I got my rating on Apple back to 5 stars. Now, we're still working on Spotify for reasons I will explain in a moment, but I'm here to share the nitty-gritty with you in case this ever happens to you. So to break this down, I want to look at this with you from 3 different angles. The first being the emotional angle of getting that 1-star review, the sucker punch to the gut that 1-star review is. We're going to also look at it from the psychological angle, and this is where the counterintuitive piece of this whole process to elevating your ratings again comes into play. You're going to love what I share with you here. And then we're also going to look at the podcasting angle of this, because at the end of the day, there are things that you can do to bring that rating up, and not a lot of people know that. But let's dive into the emotional piece of it first, because I remember when I saw that rating drop from a perfect 5 to a 4.9, it felt like a personal attack. You spend so much energy, so much time, so much effort showing up every week on your podcast, serving your audience, serving your community, doing it from love, doing it without recognition, doing a lot of it for a long time before you really ever start to pick up traction. That is how podcasting is. If you have a podcast, podcasting is a long game. This is what we are signing up for when we sign up to be podcast hosts. Also, though, my reputation is one of the things that I value the most. And rejection is one of my greatest fears. It's one of my deepest fears. It is something I am working on as a human, learning how to human, okay? But it still stings. So if and when a 1-star review happens, I'm not going to tell you to dismiss how you feel, because you need to allow yourself to feel that flood of emotions, the sadness, the rage, the hurt, all those emotions that come flooding into your nervous system in that moment where you see that happen. But then, instead of focusing on what you can't control, which is the fact that someone had the friggin' nerve to leave you a 1-star rating or a 1-star review, what you're going to do is you're going to shift into claiming what you can control about it. You need to make a decision. You need to figure out, okay, is there anything that I can do in this instant? Here's the problem. I have seen a single bad review cause people to stop podcasting. Okay, so when that review comes in, and I'm saying when because the bigger you get, the more haters you're going to have. You can feel bad about it. You can throw something at the wall if you need to. You can scream into a pillow like I tell my 6-year-old all the time. But then you're going to pick your head up and you're going to make a plan. And that plan starts with a decision to keep going. Why? Because think about it. What would have happened if Rocky decided after the first fight that he lost that he walked out of the ring and he just threw his gloves on the side and was like, nope, I'm not doing this anymore. Or if George Washington took one look at the winter in Valley Forge and was like, all right, guys, we're packing it up. England is not that bad. We're heading back across the sea. What if J.K. Rowling gave up after getting rejected by 12 publishers? Y'all, we would have no Hogwarts. So you are not going to let one little internet troll get the better of you, okay? If it helps you, repeat after me right now. I am not going to let one little internet troll get the better of me. I am made for bigger and greater things. I have a deep purpose to which I am called to serve my audience, to do the work that I do in the world. So we got to shift that, because then and only then, once we shift out of that emotional spiral, can we then begin to look at the psychological piece of this and make a plan to actually move through it and move beyond it. So let's take a look at that psychological piece. This piece is a bit counterintuitive. This is a part that most people don't think about. I didn't think about it in that moment. And I have my good friend, Alex Sanfilippo, to thank for this. You've heard me mention him here on the podcast before. He is the co-founder of Podmatch, which is a software that's kind of like Tinder for podcast hosts and guests. It helps match you with amazing guests for your podcast, and it helps you as a guest find amazing podcasts to guest on. So while rage typing into Google, I might have also sent an overly long voice note to Alex venting about annoying people on the internet who have nothing better to do than leave 1-star ratings on podcasts. This particular person who left this rating didn't even leave a review. They didn't even have the nerve to be like, hey, your show sucks. It's just a 1-star rating. And look, I want to caveat this with, if you ever decide to run ads on your podcast, you are opening the door. You are opening yourself up to this. And the reason why is because a lot of times those ads are going to go out to cold audiences. They don't know you. They don't like you. They don't have a reason to like you. They don't have a reason to trust you. And sometimes it's intrusive. Sometimes it's annoying. Sometimes someone might just rage type a 1-star because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm tired of seeing these ads pop up. I have had people put mean comments on my Facebook ads, and I always just have fun. I like use humor and just kind of like go back at them and, a little sparring match in the comments. I'm like, you're actually helping me increase the engagement on this post right now. Thank you very much. But also I want to let you know that the bigger you get, the more likely this is to happen, because you're moving outside of your little small circle. So first of all, you got to look at it as a sign of growth. You got to see it as a sign of growth. And so that's what I told Alex when I texted him. I'm like, look, as much as it hurts, I know it means I'm growing. I know it's a good thing, but it still hurts. So what he did was he sent me a podcast episode that he recorded with Amy Porterfield, where they talked about this and where they touched on the fact that, there are certain people in the world who would never tear someone down. If they had something constructive to say, they would approach that person directly and say it, or they wouldn't say it at all. But hurt people hurt people. We know this. And he said one time it happened to him that someone had the nerve to leave a review on his podcast, 1-star, and say, I don't like your voice. And I'm like, did this person never watch Bambi? If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. But for the one person who was hurting in whatever capacity that they were hurting in their own inner world that day and decided to take it out on you, guess what? There are 100 other people, 1,000 other people who love you, who love what you stand for, who love the work that you do. And those are the people that you're going to get to rally around you in this moment. Now, I couldn't actually do this because I didn't have a review to go with the rating, which in some ways almost made it worse. But here's what Alex did when it happened to him, and I would have done the same. He shared that review online. He shared it publicly. And he put a comment about that, hey, someone left a 1-star review on the podcast today, and he wasn't looking for compliments. He did it in a way that wasn't searching for validation. But what happens is when you share that, first of all, it makes you more relatable. It makes you more human, because we all have that deep fear of rejection in some capacity. I don't know anyone, and I've never met anyone that doesn't have some fear of rejection. It is in our human nature and in our biological makeup to belong. And so what happens is when you share that review, guess what? Your tribe is going to go to battle for you. They're going to go to bat for you. And what happened with Alex was when he shared that, people went and left reviews on his podcast just to prove this other person wrong. They left tons of comments on this post just to prove that one person who said that one negative thing wrong. If you've got a community of people who know you, who like you, who trust you, who believe in the work you do, who know that, you have a terrible voice, it's not true, then welcome them in. Let them in. Let them support you. Let them rally around you. And I think you'll be surprised by what can happen. Now, let's look at this from the podcasting angle, because here's what most people don't realize. It is possible to raise your rating back up on Apple and on Spotify. Apple and Spotify ratings work on the principle of rounding up. So if you have enough positive ratings, it's going to influence the overall star rating of your podcast in a positive direction. The more negative ratings you have and the smaller number of ratings you have, the more weight those negative ratings can carry. So it's going to pull that overall number down. So the more positive reviews you have, the easier it's going to be to hold that 5-star rating. I had over 150 positive reviews on Apple. We have even more than that now. So it only took a few more ratings to balance the scales. I only had a handful of ratings on Spotify because I have been here in the podcasting space, growing my podcast for a lot longer than Spotify has been on the scene for podcasts. So the 1 star did more damage over there. It's going to take a few more 5-star ratings to bring it back up. And so here's the other thing that I want you to know, and I don't always recommend this because in most cases, it's not warranted. But if someone leaves a review on your podcast and it is truly an internet troll, like you can tell this is probably not a real person. This is just like a troll on the internet. You can petition Apple to remove it. But if it's actually a real person, it does you no harm to leave it. In fact, it might even do you more good because one bad review surrounded by dozens or hundreds of other people who actually do love your show and who cared enough to say it, it's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things. Plus, once you have enough positive reviews in the preview window of those reviews, honestly, people don't even read past that. They're not going to sit there and scroll through all of those reviews. Case in point, I was on the website the other day for a supplement company that I love, looking at a probiotic that just came back in stock. And I was looking at the reviews and everyone had such positive things to say about it. And there was one negative review. It was clear that this was a real person who just had a bad experience with the customer service of the company. They didn't get the outcome that they wanted. And so what they did was they took it out on this company by leaving a bad review. And in some cases, going back to what we can control and what we can't control. On the flip side of that, and I have a whole episode where I dug into the psychology behind why people leave positive reviews versus negative reviews. I'll link to it in the show notes for you, is that if something happens that is beyond your control, then sometimes leaving that bad review is the only thing you feel like you have control over to do. Just to kind of like stick it to someone. So know that there's psychology at work in this and know that a bad review or a negative review is not the end of the world. And it certainly should not be the end of your podcast. What you want to do is you want to rally your community around you. Now, again, don't be self-seeking. Don't be self-serving. You're not going to be out there being like, oh my gosh, I got a 1-star review. Can you please go leave me 5-star reviews? What you're going to do is you're going to say, hey, listen, if I have ever made an impact in your life, go to your clients. If you enjoy the process of working with me, if I helped you get a result or achieve a transformation or achieve a desire that you had not been able to achieve on your own, and if you listen to the podcast, I would love it if you would just take 30 seconds to leave a review publicly to let other people know about the positive experience that you had. And when you do that, here's what I'm going to do for you in return. Or when you do that, you're actually putting goodwill out into the world. It's going to come back to you in some way, shape, or form. We all know that. And so when you do that, you're actually helping other listeners know that this show is worth their time. However you want to phrase it, whatever feels natural and authentic to you, but to ask for those reviews, because a lot of times we don't ask. We don't ask when we should. And in times like this, we should definitely ask. So go to your community, ask them, hey, if I have ever made an impact, could you please help me out? It takes 30 seconds of your time. And if you have made an impact in your life, again, going back to psychology and the power of reciprocity, they will do it. They will do it. And you'll be able to get that rating back up in no time. Also, it's not the worst thing in the world to have a 4.9 rating or a 4.7 rating. It's not the worst thing in the world. And sometimes it's just the perfectionist inside of us that needs to just let go. And so I will ask you if you ever got a 1-star review or a 2-star review or a 3-star review, right? Anything pretty much less than a 5-star. What was that lesson there for you? What did you learn from it? How did that happen for you? This happened for me to help me learn I need to just relinquish my control in more areas of my life than I thought I did. And it's okay. It means nothing about me. It has no impact to my podcast. It changes nothing about me showing up here to serve you every week. And if this episode was helpful for you, then please go leave a 5-star. No, I'm kidding. But seriously, if you get value from this podcast, I would love to know about it. And so would other potential listeners. But only if you get something positive out of it, not because I'm asking you to. Because here's the thing, when you ask for that review, when you make that ask, that's the stance that you have to come at it from. It's not, okay, I'm asking you to do this thing. Can you please go do this thing? It's, no, if you have gotten something positive out of this, it would really mean a lot to me. And I know it would mean a lot to other people who are maybe considering this podcast to spend their time on. and come from that stance. It will be well received. People will support you, and you'll be surprised how quickly you can get that back up to a positive 5-star rating. Now, listen, if you have something negative to say, please take a cue from Bambi here, okay? And look, if you need to say it, send it to me in an email. I'm happy to read it. I am happy to talk to you about it. But at the end of the day, I want you to be getting a positive experience here. So if you do have something constructive, please email me. I want to know. I want to know how we can make this show better for you. And in any case, I do hope this episode was genuinely helpful for you, because it is not something that's talked about a lot. It's not something that's taught a lot. And I'm here to normalize those things. So coming up in the next episode, we're going to talk about what happens after you launch a podcast. What is really realistic to expect from your podcast? Spoiler alert, it's going to depend on the foundation that you've built. And I've got a special guest joining me to show you what it's done for her and what it can do for you too when you set it up right. That's all coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.